लाइव में ऑडियो जा रहा होगा ना?
नहीं जा रहा है, नहीं। अब 1 मिनट, अब गया।
हेडफोन में सुन लीजिए।
अरे ऐसा ही बोलता है, लेकिन पता नहीं चलेगा कि यहाँ तो दिखा रहा है।
This is the theme of today's seminar, which has been actually divided into 2 parts. One
लेडीज से चला सब बोलता वहां से चले गए, जाती है लैपटॉप बंद कर देती है।
पता नहीं काहे ऐसे
आता
अब आया।
सुना रहा है। सब बोलता वहां से चले गए, जाती है लैपटॉप बंद कर देती है। पता नहीं काहे ऐसे
डेस्कटॉप बुला दिया जा रहा है यहाँ था।
out of stage जा रहा है।
मैडम लैपटॉप वहाँ बंद कर दिया है, वहीं से है ना सारा।
अच्छा, इसीलिए
हाँ, यहाँ पर बंद तो दे देते हैं, मैडम डाउन कर दिए हैं लैपटॉप। डाउन है लैपटॉप। हाँ करते हैं ना, आगे दिक्कत वहाँ से आ रहा है।
I want to give just 3 quotes whose work I refer to and have referred to. One is Antonio Gramsci, Italian Marxist.
इनपुट ले रहा है, यहाँ से ले रहा है, लैपटॉप से ले रहा है।
And the new work struggles to be born.
ठीक है, इनपुट ले रहा है, यहाँ से ले रहा है, लैपटॉप से ले रहा है। हाँ हेलो हाँ
क्या हो रहा है समझ में नहीं।
साउंड का देखो ना क्या दिक्कत है।
यहाँ मतलब नहीं है।
क्यों चर्चा कर रहा है
कम
क्या?
से कम
अच्छा वहाँ से और आउट है, अरे
हैं?
बचा हुआ है।
और आउट
हाँ
यहाँ तो वुड लगेगा।
जय
हाँ जय को लगेगा।
और आउट है, अरे बचा हुआ है। जय
आवाज तो जी सुनो तो ज्यादा प्रफुल वहाँ बैठा बोल रहे हैं उसको तो आए ही नहीं रहे। आवाज नहीं आ रहा पूरा।
एक सेकंड निकाले सर आपका थोड़ा सा।
निकालो
निकालिए ना, अरे क्या करिए, कोई उपाय।
जा रहा है।
क्या हो रहा है? समझ क्यों आ रहा है?
जो आवाज यहाँ कर रहा है वही जा रहा है।
तो यहाँ कर रहा है इनका निकालें।
तो पूरा क्यों निकल
जा
गया?
रहा था उसमें अपने आप हुआ।
ये पूरा आवाज
हाँ म्यूट कर दी होगी। बोल रही है ना। हाँ, म्यूट कर दी होगी शायद।
हाँ म्यूट है माइक तो।
माइक वहाँ म्यूट कर
वहाँ तो
दो।
माइक है म्यूट।
डिस्प्ले
अभी एक और स्ट्रीम बंद करेंगे तो फिर वो भी है, दूसरा लिंक बनाना पड़ेगा।
एमबीएस डालिए ना,
है
एमबीएस हो कैसे डालिए?
अरे एमबीएस तो डाले हुए है, ये देख रहे हैं। यहाँ का आवाज ले ले रहा है।
The people of India project. They classified India by caste, tribe, and tribe. Now these images make Iraqis inside
अब इसको लगाइए।
वो प्रॉब्लम कर रहा है लगाए थे ना।
High Commission
मत लगाइए इसको। इसी वाला मंगाइए। अब आप काम दे रहे हैं।
दीजिए तो इसको कम कीजिए।
even today,
साउंड कम किया है, डेढ़ हो रहा है।
Africans are modified and looked at through the Western colonial. Now, cultural history also saw Indians were subjects to the studies and not changes for their own modernity. I want to
ठीक है।
अब ठीक है सर अब दिक्कत नहीं है।
I'm going to begin actually with Raghuveer Singh, who is in fact one of my favorite who is living out of Paris for a long time. And he is the first
ये लो,
photographer
आवाज वो का
after
दिया हुआ आ रहा है, अब आ रहा है।
photographers who
हम लोग
started
तो आ रहे हैं हम लोग
working
सही हो।
in He in fact worked with
देखो
अभी स्टेज बताइए।
He worked with Katya Bresson's wife, Martin Frank. He worked with her, he was her student. What he did, if you see, He had also photographed the sampans, rejected the colonial anthropological lens that exoticized them, and that is what the South African High Commission was talking about when they were representing negritude in the Museum of Congress. Now, what Jana did was that he photographed them, people in an ethnographic way, and that is what Asha will show you later in her presentation. And I'm going to end a woman photographer.
अरे यहाँ नहीं आ रहा, यूट्यूब पर नहीं आ रहा, देखें वहाँ तो दिखा रहा है।
She was a woman, in fact she lived almost up to 99 years, from 1913 to 1912. Her most popular work was interpretation images, including the dance Gandhi's funeral and Nehru's. In fact, it's not my day to do, but what I would have done, I would have shown you images of there was the outsider, Kategaso, who was looking at images of independence, and there was Abel Dyarawala, who was a press photographer. Now, what did Dyarawala do? As India's first woman photojournalist, she covered historic political events with unique eye. She captured leaders as human beings, not as symbols of identity. She broke gender hegemony by being one of the few women in a space dominated by men, documenting power from within. Broke colonial hegemony by producing images that defined independent India's identity, no longer filtered by British photographers. This photograph of Nehru releasing the dove became an enduring symbol of peace in post-colonial India. Instead of portraying him through colonial grandeur, she created a visual language that guided Indian leadership to universal human ideals. And that is what India is all about. India, when we talk of Hinduism, we don't talk of religion, we talk of the language of humanity. And this is why this image was so iconic. So this is what the whole thing on India was about. Now I'll just talk very little about some photographers because I want to give that reference to Pablo's work. I have a few photographers from Argentina. I just want to show you images because I want to set the background to how you will view Pablo's work. For Asha, I have set the mood. Now I will look at images of from post-colonial Africa and South America also. Yeah. Now this is Sara Faccio. Do I say Faccio? Faccio. Faccio. So she is from Argentina. This is an image, a gelatin silver print, unknown dimensions. And South America too, like India, had to face a lot of colonial representation. And this is how they looked at a decolonial struggle through an international cooperation. Now, which is the other one we are seeing? Yes, this is her image again, an approach to life, gelatin with silver print. This is in Africa, Peter Madhubani, who documented black life and resistance in Africa. Because this is shared histories. We've got, South Africa, Ethiopia, countries coming from South Africa, African continent showing their work, and I'm showing international solidarity, which is built through a visual storytelling, which only photography can do. This is in Soweto. Now, you look at the youth uprising which is happening there. This prints and deeply affected by it. My daughter happens to be working on a lot of lens-based work, and with AI coming in today, there are serious issues which are going to confront photographers, photography, narration, storytelling. So photography is very, very dear to me, and it is probably one of the finest tools of a visual narrative, visual essays, nothing. Image and text have to move together for you to understand the rasa of the work of art or the emotions of the work of art. So I think I have given enough of a backgrounder, and now I will invite Pablo to come and I have his biodata. If you can just pull it out for me, because I've got so many papers. I'll just give you a little bit of a backgrounder to Pablo, but I'm so sorry. I want to just give you one thing, images of authority. Yeah. You know, I was in Oxford just 2 weeks ago, and I was actually just completing my work for the Patna Kalam there, because a new gallery at some point will come up at the Patna Museum. I happened to go into this little room at the Ashmolean where I saw images of authority, portraits between Iran and Europe. Now, Iran is actually, in some ways, the center of the world, with the big Emperor Darius. It came to India. We are very much part of the great Central Persian Empire. A lot of our medieval art comes from the courts of Iran. So much of it we are influenced. Our miniature painting tradition, for example. There was a Khazar dynasty there from 1789 to 1925, which heralded a new era for the arts in Iran. Portraiture. Portraiture is a very, very important thing of cultural hegemony. The Khazar ruler, Fateh Ali Shah, now look at him. He commissioned a number of paintings to celebrate his power and achievements. Now, what is the purpose of these images? Why do people create images of themselves? Raja, Maharaja, prime ministers, presidents क्यों बनवाते हैं अपनी images? चाहे photograph हो, चाहे painting हो. Are they faithful representations? Are they idealized? अपने को बड़ा चढ़ा के करते हैं? Or are they symbolic? How was the sitter's authority and presence communicated across prints and printable objects? Now, this photograph will tell you all. I'm sure Fateh Ali did not have a beard this long, but maybe Dadi ka kuch symbol hoga. So they created, idealized it and made it. So these are very important things when we look at images of authority. Now, I want to show you another image of authority which is so interesting. This lady is not royalty, but she has great power. Now, who was she? She was actually a mistress of a very important minister in the court of the Khazar ruler Fateh Ali. Now, what do you see her with? She's a musician. She could have been a courtesan. We don't know. But she was a woman of immense power. So she is here intent playing a three-string instrument, if you look at it, known as a sitar. She sits in an elegant interior enhanced by sumptuous textiles, fine vessels, and delicacies. She's dressed in the typical attire of the Khazar era, including large trousers, the shalwar, an embroidered silk head cover, and a see-through blouse. You have to see, there is a kind of a nudity that you see there. So a woman, obviously who's so self-assured, will be in a position to show herself with transparent clothes. Now, what do we see? That would she
Latin America, Buenos Aires became the mecca for all booksellers to go. And Pablo has captured images of those booksellers. Some of them are handed from father to son, and they are family run businesses. So thank you for teaching us something new yesterday. Now I'm going to go down and enjoy your photographs, which I did yesterday. Thank you for being here. And on behalf of the Bihar Museum, I once again extend our gratitude to you for bringing the pictures, to you, Andrea, to your embassy, and being here with us and sharing your work. Thank you.
Do you have?
Hello, hello. Yeah.
Hello. So, thank you, Alka. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you for the warm, calidez. How do you say?
Warmth. Warmth. Ah,
Okay.
I'll just do it from here. So, मैं इनका नाम एक बार ले देता हूँ पाब्लो कातलिरेव्स्की Pablo Katlirevsky. Born in Cordoba, Argentina in 1982, Pablo Katlirevsky holds a degree in film and television. He worked for several years as a producer in advertising, political campaigns, and documentary films. In 2015, for personal reasons, he moved to Israel, where he began taking photographs. Through self-taught study, photography gradually became his professional path. By 2023, he returned to his home country, where he started working with mentors and developing photographic projects. An Argentine Walks is a recovery. The exhibition that we have here, An Argentine Walk, is a recovery of his personal archive, inviting our viewers to discover the hidden beauty behind rural landscapes and urban architecture. So, yeah, so we invite Pablo to go ahead. Gracias, Pablo. Puedes empezar.
Bueno, muchas gracias. I'm a little bit nervous. Anoche cuando pensaba que podía hablar en español, se me vinieron muchísimas más ideas de las que había preparado previamente.
कल रात जब इन्हें पता चला कि ये स्पेनिश में बात करने वाले हैं और देयर विल बी अ ट्रांसलेटर अवेलेबल, सो कई सारी और चीज़ें इनके दिमाग में आने लगी धीरे धीरे, नए आइडियाज़, बिकॉज अपनी लैंग्वेज में बात करना, एक्सप्रेस करना, दिस अ डिफरेंट थिंग, नो.
De todas formas, voy a tratar de seguir esto para que no sea muy extenso, pero después en Q&A podemos ir un poco más profundo.
हालांकि ये कोशिश करेंगे कि इन जो जनरल आइडिया प्रिपेयर करके लाए थे उसी पे ही विल ट्राई टू स्टिक देयर, बट and later in the question answer round we can come to the other questions.
También para hacer fácil el trabajo a vos, vamos con el script.
Dale. और मेरे लिए भी थोड़ा काम आसान करने के लिए स्क्रिप्ट के हिसाब से ही चलेंगे. हालांकि puedes salir un poquito, ahí voy a andar, ¿va?
Para empezar, yo me hago una pregunta: ¿por qué es importante la documentación fotográfica para mí? Y la respuesta es porque mis abuelos se fueron de Europa para Argentina a principios del siglo XX y no hay un solo registro de ellos. Mi origen está supeditado a rumores o a documentos que se perdieron en la guerra o en las aduanas. It's the first paragraph of.
Yeah. So, सबसे पहले फोटोग्राफी क्यों इम्पोर्टेंट है फॉर पाब्लो, सबसे उसकी डॉक्यूमेंटेशन वैल्यू क्या है, डॉक्यूमेंटेशन क्यों करना चाहिए. सो 20वीं सदी के शुरुआत में उनके जो ग्रैंड पेरेंट्स थे, दे मूव फ्रॉम यूरोप टू अर्जेंटीना, नो, ड्यूरिंग द वॉर, नो, और उस समय की इनके पास कोई हिस्टोरिकल रिकॉर्ड नहीं है, not photos but no other records they have of his grandparents, grandmom, granddad, no. and so that was lost for him. So he feels a certain personal obligation or no this attitude कि photos के through जो चीज़ें भूल जाती हैं उनको हम maintain कर सकते हैं. So that's as documentation, photo is very important for him. That is the first part of his presentation.
Una foto se puede interpretar de muchas maneras, pero una persona saltando al agua es una persona saltando al agua.
Yeah. A photo can be interpreted in so many ways. इसको कई तरह से देखा जा सकता है. But एक आदमी जो पानी में छलांग लगा रहा है, वो एक आदमी है जो पानी में छलांग लगा रहा है.
In every language.
सारे भाषाओं में वो वही आदमी है जो पानी में कूद रहा है.
Bueno, primero, muchas gracias a Bihar Museum por la invitación y a todos ustedes por venir, y gracias por darle lugar a los artistas del sur global.
सबसे पहले बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद बिहार म्यूजियम का, आप सब लोगों का, जिन्होंने हमें बुलाया और जिन्होंने इस एग्जीबिशन को रिसीव किया और पाब्लो को यहाँ इनवाइट किया और ग्लोबल साउथ की हिस्ट्रीज नैरेटिव्स को जगह दी जा रही है. इसके लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद.
También gracias a la Embajada Argentina en la India por todo el apoyo y las gestiones necesarias para que yo pueda llegar desde tan lejos.
और साथ साथ अर्जेंटीनियन एम्बेसी जो इंडिया में है दिल्ली में, उनका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद जिन्होंने सारी मैनेजमेंट, सारा जो लॉजिस्टिक्स को ध्यान में रखा और ताकि वो उतनी दूर से अर्जेंटीना से भारत आ सकें, बिहार आ सकें. आप देख सकते हैं कितना लंबा सफ़र है. ¿Quieres moverte un poco o así estás bien?
No, it's okay.
Está bien.
Thank you.
Do you want me to say? ¿Quieres que diga?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so these are some reflections and thoughts to discuss the colonization of the global south and how photography can help us understand what is native, what belongs to us. Also help us understand who we are, at least in our origin.
Okay. It's okay. I wrote this. Espero que mis palabras y mis imágenes estén a la altura de las circunstancias. Lo mismo espero de mi inglés, que lo estudié en la escuela y casi nunca más lo usé.
Yeah. So hopefully मेरे शब्द और मेरे photos इस occasion के लिए खड़े उतरे, उनके लिए सही नज़र आए आप लोगों को, और शायद मेरी इंग्लिश भी ठीक ठाक हो, जो I'm talking about him, जो उन्होंने स्कूल में पढ़ी और उसके बाद उनका भी इस्तेमाल नहीं किया उस इंग्लिश को, but it has become a communication mode of communication.
Sorry about that. Quería empezar por ahí, por el inglés que estudié en la escuela. El país angloparlante más cercano está a 6.000 kilómetros de Argentina.
Yeah, I wanted to start from there कि मैंने इंग्लिश स्कूल में पढ़ी और उसके बाद फिर कभी नहीं, और जो सबसे नज़दीकी कंट्री है अर्जेंटीना से जहाँ इंग्लिश बोली जाती है वो लगभग 6,000 किलोमीटर की दूरी पर है.
Teniendo cientos de lenguas originarias dentro de nuestro país, dentro de los países vecinos y el idioma portugués como principal aliado en la región, a pesar de ello, lo que se estudia comúnmente en las escuelas como segundo idioma es el inglés.
अर्जेंटीना के अंदर ही 100 से ज़्यादा ओरिजिनल नेटिव मौलिक भाषाएं हैं, साथ साथ पोर्चुगीज़ जो सबसे नज़दीकी दूसरी भाषा है, सेकंड लैंग्वेज. इन सब के होने के बावजूद जो स्कूल्स में, जैसे पाब्लो ने पढ़ा, जो स्कूल्स में पढ़ाया जाता है एज द फर्स्ट सेकंड लैंग्वेज इज़ इंग्लिश, जो कि एक अपने आप में एक कॉन्ट्रडिक्शन है.
Yo sé que es un tema complejo y que merece mayor análisis, el cual no pretendo que profundicemos ahora, pero sí quería hacer la observación, porque es interesante pensar el lenguaje como pauta vigente de la colonización.
Obviously ये एक महत्वपूर्ण और मुश्किल जटिल टॉपिक है जिस पे हम बात कर सकते हैं, हालांकि ये हमारा आज का टॉपिक नहीं है, उस पे हम ज़्यादा डीप नहीं जाएंगे, बट इसको ध्यान में रखना चाहिए कि लैंग्वेज अपने आप में, भाषा अपने आप में एक कॉलोनाइजेशन का मोड बन सकती है, एक वे ऑफ कॉलोनाइजेशन हो सकती है. हम अपने आप में भी सोच सकते हैं बिहार में इंग्लिश एज ए सेकेंड लैंग्वेज पढ़ाई जाती है.
Otro aspecto de la colonización para pensarlo, me gustaría traer un viejo lema que se volvió popular en Argentina, dicho por un periodista llamado Arturo Jaureche, que dice: peor que el gringo o que el extranjero que nos compra es el criollo que nos vende.
इसी बात को थोड़ा और ध्यान में रखते हुए मुझे पाब्लो पसंद करेंगे, एक जर्नलिस्ट जो कि अर्जेंटीनियन जर्नलिस्ट हैं आर्तुरो खाउरेचे, जिनकी फ़ोटो हम देख सकते हैं। उन्होंने कहा था, और यहाँ पे फॉरेनर लिखा है, लेकिन स्पेनिश में जो वर्ड है वो ग्रिंगो होता है, उसका हिंदी में ट्रांसलेशन हम फिरंग कह सकते हैं, फिरंगी। तो उस फिरंगी से जो हमें ख़रीदना चाहता है, उससे और ख़राब है वो इंसान जो मूल तौर पे तो यहाँ का हो, बट जो हमें बेचना चाहता हो।
Bueno, y desde esa premisa voy a la idea de foto como documento.
और इस ज़मीन पर इस ज़मीन से हम इस बात को समझेंगे कि फ़ोटो एज ए डॉक्यूमेंट कैसे देखा जा सकता है, और देखते हैं पाब्लो।
Para quienes estuvieron ayer, Andrés dijo algo muy importante. Argentina es el 8º país en extensión de territorio después de la India y tiene unas 20 veces menos habitantes.
Sí. हाँ, कल आंद्रेस जो हमारे अर्जेंटीनियन एम्बेसडर हैं, उन्होंने कहा था, इस बात को कल बताया था कि अर्जेंटीना 8वें नंबर पे है दुनिया के सबसे बड़े ज्योग्राफिकल एक्सटेंशन के हिसाब से, इंडिया 7वें नंबर पे है। लेकिन अर्जेंटीना में पॉपुलेशन इंडिया से लगभग 20 गुना या 25 गुना कम है, बहुत कम पॉपुलेशन है इंडिया के हिसाब से। तो ये बात कल कही गई थी।
Okay, so I wrote this. En mi país, Argentina, la extensión de tierra, agua y minerales es muy grande y abundante, y es un activo anhelado en el mundo entero.
So अर्जेंटीना मेरे देश में लैंड, मिनरल्स और पानी की बहुतायत है, अधिक कमाल की मात्रा में वो अवेलेबल है, और ये एक ऐसा एसेट है जो सारा दुनिया, स्पेशली ग्लोबल नॉर्थ, इसे अपने कब्जे में करना चाहता है।
Estos recursos tienen dueños, grandes corporaciones y capitales extranjeros, y se encuentran atados a ciertas leyes y determinadas formas de convivencia que hace que sus habitantes, aquellos a quienes se puede pensar como dueños legítimos, no pueden hacer uso de su tierra o de sus recursos, y poco a poco tengan que emigrar a las ciudades por subsistencia.
और इन सारे जो मिनरल्स, जो नेचुरल प्राकृतिक संपदा है, इसके धीरे धीरे जो ओनर्स बनते जा रहे हैं वो बड़ी कंपनीज, बिग कॉरपोरेशंस, इंटरनेशनल इन्वेस्टमेंट, इंटरनेशनल मनी, वो उसको धीरे धीरे ओन करती जा रही है। और जो वहाँ के लोग हैं, जो एक्चुअली वहाँ इसके ओनर कहे जा सकते हैं या इसके रियल यूज़र कहे जा सकते हैं प्राकृतिक संपदा के, उन्हें धीरे धीरे वहाँ से माइग्रेट करना पड़ रहा है, दूसरे शहरों में जाना पड़ रहा है। उनको अपनी प्राकृतिक संपदा का मतलब ओन तो छोड़ें, इस्तेमाल भी करने की इजाज़त बड़ी कंपनियां नहीं दे रही हैं, जो कि फॉरेनर बिग कॉरपोरेशन, मल्टीनेशनल कॉरपोरेशंस हैं। सो धीरे धीरे कई सारे जो पॉपुलेशन वहाँ के हैं, उन्हें शहरों की ओर जाना पड़ रहा है रोज़गार के लिए।
Esto no está en el guión. En estas fotos se puede ver a la gente usando el agua de manera recreativa o buscando su alimento, que no sucede en todos lados.
So इन फोटोज़ में हम देख सकते हैं लोग कैसे पानी का इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं, पानी के साथ जी रहे हैं, सिंपली मे बी जस्ट रिक्रिएशनल पर्पसेस के लिए इंजॉय कर रहे हैं पानी का, या फॉर वेज ऑफ लिविंग, उसका इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं अपने जीवन यापन के लिए, जो कि कई बार अब बहुत जगहों पे नहीं दिख पाता है क्योंकि ये धीरे धीरे मना हो रहा है।
Lo mismo con estos paisajes.
इन जो जगह यहाँ हम देख रहे हैं फोटोज़, जो परिदृश्य देखे जा रहे हैं, उनके साथ भी ये सब चीज़ें हैं। वहाँ पे लोग पहले आराम से घूम सकते थे, समय बिता सकते थे, अब मुश्किल है।
En la ciudad parece que todo ocurre entre luces, el entretenimiento y la distracción. También hay olvido. Se pierde cierto contacto con la naturaleza que poco a poco se transforma desde una lógica de explotación en grandes extensiones de tierra sembrada o en pozos para mineras. Y cuando no es un motivo o el otro, el turismo también coloniza.
शहरों में एक चकाचौंध है, नो, एक एंटरटेनमेंट, लाइट्स, डिस्ट्रैक्शन, वो चीज़ें दिखती हैं धीरे धीरे। साथ साथ एक भूलने की कला शहरों में है, एक फॉरगेटफुलनेस है, जो अपनी चीज़ों को, अपनी प्राकृतिक संपदा से टच, नेचुरल प्राकृतिक धरोहर से जो हमारा कांटेक्ट है, उसको धीरे धीरे हम भूलते जा रहे हैं। नेचर, जो प्राकृतिक संपदाएं हैं, वो धीरे धीरे शोषण की जगह बनती जा रही हैं। बड़े बड़े फार्म लैंड्स बना देना या बड़े बड़े माइनिंग होल्स क्रिएट कर देना जहाँ पे पहले जंगल हुआ करते थे। और जब ये सब नहीं होता, जब फ्रैकिंग नहीं होती, एक्सप्लॉयटेशन नहीं होता, तब टूरिज़्म आ जाता है, एक और कॉलोनाइजिंग फैक्टर जो हमें एक और इस तरह से कॉलोनाइज करने का तरीका बन चुका है, पर्यटन अपने आप में।
Le saqué fotos a la última generación de habitantes de esas comarcas rurales que persisten en los intersticios de explotación. Sus familias, sin oportunidades, ya se fueron a la ciudad.
इन्होंने कुछ ऐसे गांव की जगहों के लास्ट जनरेशन्स की फ़ोटो ली, जो कि अब वहाँ पे सालों साल से रह रहे थे बट अब नहीं रह रहे। सिर्फ कुछ ही लोग जो लास्ट जनरेशन्स के हैं जो वहाँ रह रहे हैं, उनकी फैमिलीज़ बिना अपॉर्चुनिटीज़ के, बिना अवसरों के अब शहरों की तरफ जा चुकी हैं। और कई सारे ऐसे फ़ोटोज़ अभी हमें देखने को मिलेंगे।
Y además intenté contextualizar en un presente difuso por tanta secuencia de imágenes la narrativa histórica desde una mirada presente, una cierta búsqueda de recuperación de lo autóctono.
इन फोटोज़ के थ्रू, के द्वारा जो मैंने कोशिश की है, पाब्लो ने जो कोशिश की है, वो इस इतिहास, ये जो स्टोरीज़ हैं, ये जो कहानियाँ हैं, ऐतिहासिक कहानियाँ, उसको इस प्रेजेंट से दिखाने की, आज से इस इतिहास की ओर एक नज़र लेने की, और शायद इसको रेकुपरेट करने की, शायद उसको वापस लाने की, जो कि मूल है, जो कि मौलिक है हमारा, उसको वापस लाने की और शायद उस तक पहुँचने की।
No está en el guión, pero por ejemplo, este hombre vive al pie de esta montaña, pero no puede acceder a esta vista.
Oh, yeah. So this person, ये जो लोग आदमी हैं, ये रहते हैं जो माउंटेन अभी हमने देखा, उसके बिल्कुल सबसे नीचे जो वैली है वहाँ रहते हैं, बट अब उन्हें माउंटेन पर जाना अलाउड नहीं है, वो जा नहीं सकते बिकॉज ऑफ परमिशंस। सो ये एक अपने आप में एक अगेन कॉन्ट्रडिक्शन है।
En mis fotos de la Patagonia, al comienzo de la exhibición, se ven paisajes y se ven personas. Hoy se pueden ver, hoy existen.
जो पहले हमने फ़ोटो देखी कुछ पतागोनिया की, जो कुछ रियो नेग्रो, ब्लैक रिवर का जो फ़ोटोज़ वहाँ पे देखी हमने, वो अभी हैं, अभी हम उन्हें देख सकते हैं, अभी उनकी फ़ोटोज़ पाब्लो और हम देख रहे हैं, अभी हैं।
Pero hay muchos paisajes o muchos accesos al agua que ya no existen. Y es que es tan vasto el país que los ciudadanos no nos damos cuenta. Hay que viajar mucho por rutas vacías, luego entrar en caminos rurales y por último acceder a las personas. Personas que hoy están solas.
बट कई सारे ऐसे जगह, ऐसे परिदृश्य, ऐसी नदियाँ, ऐसे पानी के स्रोत अब नहीं है, अब उनका कोई नामो निशान भी शायद नहीं है। अब वहाँ पे जो लोग हैं वो भी नहीं रहते। लोगों को अर्जेंटीना में बहुत दूर दूर तक ट्रैवल करके अलोन पाथ्स पे पहुँचना पड़ता है, और दूर जाएंगे तो आपको कुछ लोग मिलेंगे। मोमेंट, जो आज ये लोग जो हैं वो अब अकेले पड़ गए हैं, ज़्यादातर लोग वहाँ जो है अकेले रह रहे हैं, उनका भी शायद कल हमें कोई नामो निशान ना मिले। शायद अगर हम वहाँ जाके उन्हें ढूंढें और उनसे मिलें तो शायद वो निशान रहे।
Personas que hoy están solas. El día de mañana, ya sea por la explotación de los recursos naturales o por las huellas del turismo, quizás no quedará registro de su paso, salvo que las vayamos a buscar y a conocer.
जी, शायद हो सकता है कल टूरिज़्म का एक्सप्लॉयटेशन जो है या इंडस्ट्रियल एक्सप्लॉयटेशन, फ्रैकिंग, उस वजह से शायद वो लोग, वो जगहें, वो पानी के स्रोत शायद नहीं मिलें. Until we go and look for them, until we go and talk to them and know them.
Como ellos que tuvieron que abandonar el campo y ir a vivir a la ciudad y trabajar en ese tipo de condiciones que quizás acá es común, en Argentina no tanto.
So जैसे ये लोग, फॉर एग्जांपल, ये जो लोग हैं ये गांव के हैं, जिन्होंने कि अपना गांव छोड़ना पड़ा इसी वजहों से, और शहर में आके किसी सुपरमार्केट में कैशियर का काम करना, और फिर शायद जो ये कहते हैं पाब्लो कि शायद इंडिया में ये इतना कॉमन ना हो सुपरमार्केट में कैशियर का काम करना, बट वहाँ पे बहुत कॉमन है. जो लोग बाहर से आते हैं उनको इसी तरह के काम प्राप्त होता है.
Ahora son unas fotos de Buenos Aires de la noche, que quieren marcar un poco el paso de la vida tranquila a la intensidad y a la distracción.
So अब ये फोटोज जो हम देख रहे हैं ये बुएनोस आयर्स की हैं. लाइट्स का चकाचौंध, थोड़ा एक अंतर हमें दिखेगा, जो हमें कॉन्ट्रास्ट दिखेगा, जो हमने अभी देखा गांव का एक ट्रैंक्विल काम स्पेस, ओपन स्पेसेस. अब ये शहर की एक चकाचौंध, शहर का हल्ला, शोरगुल, ये हमें दिखेगा. बुएनोस आयर्स एक बहुत बड़ा शहर है, सो आप देख सकते हैं.
Una metamorfosis entre lo urbano y las raíces que se van perdiendo y se vuelve todo gris.
So ये फोटो फॉर एग्जांपल इज लाइक अ मेटामॉर्फोसिस, जहाँ पे रूट्स जो हैं धीरे धीरे बदलते बदलते एक ग्रे मैटर में बदल गई हैं, जो कि लाइट्स में, शहरों की लाइट्स में गुम हो गई हैं और कुछ ग्रे नज़र आता है.
Si podés leer eso.
Today you can see this Patagonian landscape from the road. Beyond the mountains, entry is almost forbidden. In the years to come, what will remain? Raquel.
Raquel. Una historia.
A story, a narrative story of a person, Raquel.
Pienso, por ejemplo, los hijos de esta señora se tuvieron que mudar al pueblo más cercano cuando se prohibió que se saquen las piedras de la montaña si no se trataba de una compañía registrada.
So इन ये जो वुमेन है राकेल, इनके बच्चों को वो अब अपने पर्वत जहाँ पे रहती थी वहाँ पे अब नहीं रह सकते, क्योंकि उनको माउंटेन से पत्थर जो चुनने का काम करती थी और जो चीज़ें चुनने का काम करती थी अब वो अलाउड नहीं है. It is only the right of a big foreign company. तो ये इनके बच्चे, इनको अब वो शहर में नहीं रहते, वहाँ गांव में नहीं रहते, बाहर रहते हैं. ये अकेली गांव में रहती हैं.
Lo que significa que las personas que artesanalmente fueron usando el monte como medio para subsistir, ahora ya no pueden. Solo las grandes corporaciones tienen acceso a eso.
जो कि इसका मतलब ये हुआ कि जो लोग सदियों से, सालों से, दशकों से अपने इकोसिस्टम, अपने माउंटेन्स के इकोसिस्टम में रह रहे थे, माउंटेन्स एग्जाम्पल है, बट वहाँ रह रहे थे, अब वो वहाँ नहीं रह सकते. अब वो वहाँ अपना जीवन यापन नहीं कर सकते, अब वो वहाँ पे अपना जीवन व्यतीत नहीं कर सकते, और उन्हें वापस बाहर निकलना है. सिर्फ अधिकार किसका है? तो फॉरेन इन्वेस्टमेंट का, बिग कॉरपोरेशंस का.
Sus hijos en el pueblo tienen que buscar trabajo. Quizás consiguen como cajeros en un supermercado o quizás empleo como policías.
अब उनके बच्चे शहरों में सुपरमार्केट में काम कर रहे हैं, कैशियर हो गए हैं, या शायद पुलिस बन जाते हैं.
Y en esa hipótesis, su trabajo pasa a ser cuidar que su madre no viole la ley haciendo uso del monte y cuidar así los intereses de las empresas.
और अब उनके अपने बच्चे ही जो शहरों में काम कर रहे हैं, जो पुलिस हैं, वो ये ख्याल रखते हैं, वो ये ध्यान रखते हैं कि उनकी माँ जो सालों से पर्वतों पर रह रही थी, अब उन पर्वतों का इस्तेमाल ना कर सकें. अब उन पर्वतों को उनके बच्चों का काम ही इस तरह से इस्तेमाल हो रहा है ताकि उनकी माँ जो कि सालों से उन पर्वतों का इस्तेमाल नहीं, पर्वतों के साथ रह रही थी, अब ना रह सके.
Y creo que esa es una de las mayores trampas del mundo globalizado, que no sepamos reconocer quiénes somos ni de dónde venimos.
और शायद यही एक महान ग्लोबलाइजेशन का जो प्रोसेस है, उसका एक महान जाल जो इन्होंने बुना है हमारे चारों तरफ, ये यही है कि हमें पता ही नहीं कि हम कौन हैं और हम कहाँ से आते हैं.
Las democracias del sur global como sistemas complejos, imperfectos, que retroalimentan contradicciones y procesos de extranjerización o neocolonialismo, plantean estos escenarios presentes que quizás puedan resistirse repensando, revalorizando, visibilizando y recuperando lo autóctono.
सो जो शायद अभी हमारी जो ग्लोबल साउथ, जिसको शायद हिंदी में कुछ भी कहा जा सकता है, निचले हिस्से की डेमोक्रेसीज़, नो वैश्विक निचला हिस्सा, उसकी जो डेमोक्रेसीज हैं, शायद अब हम कुछ कोशिश कर सकते हैं, क्योंकि हमारे सिस्टम्स परफेक्ट नहीं हैं. यूरोप या ग्लोबलाइज्ड वर्ल्ड की तरह हमारे सिस्टम्स परफेक्ट नहीं हैं और हमारे सिस्टम्स कॉम्प्लेक्स हैं. सो हम अपने आप में इन प्रोसेसेस को, जो फॉरेन कंट्रोल का जो प्रोसेस है, उसको हम शायद रोक सकते हैं, कोशिश कर सकते हैं शायद, बिकॉज हमारे पास जो हमारी रियलिटीज़ आर फुल ऑफ कॉन्ट्रडिक्शंस, आर ओन रियलिटीज़. सो ये न्यू कॉलोनलिज्म जो अभी चल रहा है, जो दोबारा से एक नया कॉलोनाइजेशन का प्रोसेस इम्परसेप्टिवली स्टार्ट हो गया है, उसको शायद ग्लोबल साउथ की डेमोक्रेसीज कमिंग टुगेदर दे कैन हेल्प.
Y esa es la mirada que propongo en esta selección de fotografías, la recuperación de lo propio como forma de resistencia.
और यही कोशिश, यही दर्शन, यही पर्सपेक्टिव इस पूरे एग्जीबिशन का मेन हिस्सा है. इस कोशिश के थ्रू इनके ये कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि हम दोबारा से पुनर्विचार करें हमारी अपनी धरोहरों पर, हमारी अपनी संपदा पर, दोबारा उसको, अपने आप को दोबारा से देखें.
Y bueno, como dije al comienzo, porque es importante la documentación para mí, y no está en el texto. Porque es importante la documentación para mí, siento que la historia de Raquel es muy parecida a la historia de mi familia, que fue como dije al comienzo.
सो यही दोबारा से सोचना, अपनी मौलिक चीज़ों का ध्यान रखना. un poco la foto, sí. शायद जो पहले, सबसे पहले इन्होंने कहा अपने फैमिली के बारे में, अपने ग्रैंड पेरेंट्स के बारे में, अपने मूल जड़ के बारे में, इस स्टोरी और राकेल की स्टोरी में ये थोड़ा सिमिलर है, कि जहाँ पे अपने जड़ों को, अपने मूल जो जगह है, मूल धरोहर है, उसको ढूंढा जा रहा है. और शायद इस तक हम पहुँच सकें, को छू सकें, तो शायद हमारा कुछ, हम इस दिशा में शायद आगे बढ़ सकते हैं.
Si nadie registra y guarda las fotos o los papeles de Raquel, se va a volver a perder su historia.
अगर कोई भी राकेल के फ़ोटोज़ को नहीं देखेगा, अगर कोई भी राकेल के फ़ोटोज़ को नहीं संभाल लेगा, नहीं रखेगा, तो शायद राकेल की फ़ोटोज़, राकेल की जो हिस्ट्री है, राकेल की जो कहानी है, वो भी इसी तरह से कहीं गुम हो जाएगी. शायद उसका नाम भी कहीं गुम हो जाए.
Muchas gracias.
Many thanks to you.
Thank you, Pablo. Thank you, Nilesh. I think this came as a very pleasant surprise for me, because I too was nervous about communication, and then Nilesh स्वयंभू हो गए, तो बड़ा अच्छा लगा. धन्यवाद. और आपने भी बहुत अच्छे तरीके से हमारी सहायता करी, उसके हम बहुत आभारी हैं आपके लिए. Thank you very much. I'm now going to invite Asha Thadani. What is interesting for me about Asha is that I met her just about 4 years ago by chance, and we did a wonderful exhibition called Broken at the Habitat Center, which by itself created quite, आजकल तो नया word है viral, it created a virus in the media. We didn't expect that. Asha actually is a fashion photographer. तो जो इन्होंने images करी थी of the denotified tribes, some of them were extraordinarily beautiful in their sadness and melancholy. They looked like fashion portraits, and there was a deep melancholy which came from them. There was a photograph particularly of that young girl, I think वो शोभा डे ने खरीदी थी ना, what was it? She was a miner, yeah. She was a coal miner, this young girl, I think she must not even be 6 years old when you expect children to be playing. The misery in her eyes, it just pulled at your heartstrings. I was captivated by her pictures, and I've been following her work ever since. She focuses on people who live beneath the shiny surface that many of us skate along. Asha earns her bread and butter photographing the shiny surfaces, but her main work, her devotion, her dedication is rooted in deep socio-cultural political themes that delve into the inner lives of the marginalized communities who rarely find representation in mainstream media. For almost 3 decades, she has documented people at the lowest end of power hierarchies with the intent to start conversations about social disparities and the human condition. तो जब ये एक मल्लाह की फ़ोटो खींच रही थी तो ये आधे घंटे गंगा में खड़ी रही to get that moment. So I have talked to her at great length at the way she has shot the pictures. And for me, the process of her work is more important than the actual image. They are full of rasa and emotion. She has also been nominated for the Henri Cartier-Bresson Award in 2015. Her work has been exhibited at the Christie's Auction House, Paris, and the Albert Kahn Museum in Paris. She has exhibited solo at the Piramal Gallery, NCPA, Mumbai, and the India Habitat Center, New Delhi. Welcome, Asha. And she will tell you all about her work and the images. I think they're all in black and white, so that's a very interesting thing. You've seen Pablo in color, and now you're going to see black and white. After Asha's presentation, we'll have a little bit of a question and answer where you can then talk to the artists directly.
So my work on the denotified communities, which I'll be showing you today, I basically think about what it means to be free. What is the nature of freedom? Is it just the political freedom, the right to vote, or is it more intrinsic to our existence? So basically, India's independence, it marked a new chapter in our history, but it came with the price of heavy colonial legacy. The British left behind weak political systems that kind of prioritized resource exploitation and extraction more than the development of communities. And this created a long-lasting grapple that we as Indians have with reclaiming our cultural identity. Today, in our present neo-colonial times, the fight for mental liberation has become this very arduous and uphill battle. The lingering effects of colonialism still exist in the way we think, our ideas, our beliefs, and this has resulted in the manifestation of a colonial self. And this colonial self is normally adopted by more dominant communities, the way we look at people who are not belonging to the same strata of society. And then there's also a depersonalization of the self, which is what happens with marginalized communities, and this is what makes it really difficult to undo the damage of colonial rule and unlearn all the imposed narratives that we have been fed with over decades and decades. My work actually delves into this complex issue. It takes a deep dive. And the lens that it uses is the denotified communities, also called the Vimukta Jati. A lot of people also know these people as the Ghumatu Jati. So Ghumatu is basically the nomadic and migrant population who their lifestyle is migration. That is what their identity is. They move around from place to place, and this has been their lifestyle for centuries. So the reason I wanted to look at decolonization through them is because these are the communities that were branded as criminal under the Criminal Tribes Act of 1871. A lot of communities were just randomly branded as born criminals, and the stigma, it continues till today. Though the act was repealed later, the Habitual Offenders Act came into place, and nothing has changed even 75 years after independence. The thing is that our social structure already had deep-seated inequalities inbuilt in our social life. And what the colonists did was just kind of reinstate these inequalities by different policies. So what the colonial mindsets were is that they just perpetuated inferiority. But they actually built upon and amplified what was already available in our society. So for example, even in pre-colonial times, we always had the caste system. The colonists recognized this sort of social grouping, social categorization and classification, and just latched onto it and then further perpetuated our class and social inequalities. The architect of this system was Herbert Hope Risley. He was a British ethnographer and bureaucrat. He conceived of this Criminal Tribes Act because his main intent was to categorize and classify a very complex population. And he did this with the lens of race and class. And his theories were also very deep rooted in the pseudoscience of the time. So basically, just because the way a face structure looked like, the length of a nose, the color of the skin, so all this is very pseudo-racial theory. But this kind of formed the intellectual framework to justify the Criminal Tribes Act of the time. Post-colonial times, these narratives have not changed. A lot of these communities continue to still suffer stigmatization and marginalization at the hands of our citizens itself. And a lot of the cultural understanding and perception of these people is still kind of rooted in the past, how they were treated. The way the colonists treated migrant populations is no different from the way they're perceived and treated today. So I want to look at a few communities. The first community is what I shot in the little run of Kutch. It is the Koli community. These are communities who are denotified communities. A lot of them have this double whammy of discrimination. Not only are they denotified communities, but they're also Dalits. So they suffer double discrimination. First is the stigma of being at the lowest end of the caste hierarchy. And then there is this additional stigma of being considered criminal. So these are the salt workers in the little run of Kutch. They're also known as Agaria. Agar means salt. And they have been working in the little run of Kutch for centuries. So here you can see a man who is like the fourth generation of a salt worker. He is 85 at the moment, and he has been continuing this generational process of farming salt. So what I wanted to talk about from the colonial perspective as well is that the colonials always had this anthropocentric worldview. They always thought that humanity, they created hierarchies in every aspect of life. So for them, human beings came at the uppermost end, and everything else in the universe, in the environment, ecology, be it plants, animals, water bodies, everything is supposed to be in the service of human beings. Everything has to be exploited, made into factory conveyor belt processes just to serve the selfish motives of human beings. And in this case, it was themselves, because a lot of the colonial worldview is what led to colonial expansion and capitalist systems. Environmental degradation and social oppression throughout the world, wherever there has been colonial rule, goes hand in hand. It's an intrinsic link, and that is how they built their legacies, which is through resource exploitation and ecocide. So when you look at any sort of colonial practice, the way they treated land and landscape, see, you look at this. For most of the indigenous communities, they make this, for them, a landscape is something that they are part of. They are an outgrowth of their environment. They follow migratory circles which are based on nature itself. It's the colonists who made this distinction between land and landscape. We always considered the landscape as part of us. We don't look at it like the way colonists started looking at land, which is something that can be measured, which is tangible, which is the source of productivity. This is the land to be exploited, and this is the wealth to be gained from this size of land. These sort of concepts came about only when we were colonized. It was never there in our indigenous and native practices at all. And if you look at it, it's only been the colonists who have shortchanged natives in their own land. First, they start with a physical intrusion. That physical intrusion would be to start controlling the land and the environment. And then they get down to the next level, which is cultural intrusion. And then there is complete erasure of identity, wherein the natives are left with this depersonalized self that I was talking about. So I want to tell you a bit about the Little Run of Kutch and salt mining. So the British era laws, it was not only the Criminal Tribes Act, but then there were other laws which came in later, which further marginalized these communities. So if you look at the Indian Salt Act of 1882, it established a British monopoly over the production and distribution and sales of salt. And in fact, there was a heavy tax imposed on Indians. Violating the act, which is by producing salt on your own, was considered a criminal offense. And a lot of indigenous populations in India, they were made or classified as criminals just by going about the kind of life that they always had led. For example, these salt workers, the tradition of making salt is 400 years old. But then suddenly, with colonial practice and prejudice, they were just considered criminal for whatever they had always done. And that was the case with the Criminal Tribes Act. Whoever would oppose this act was deemed criminal. Whoever would protest against it, whoever did not comply with new laws that were made, as opposed to the law of the land that was followed, all these people were just immediately put under that bracket. So, when you look at those times, there was a ray of hope, because if you see, our freedom was actually got by the Dandi March, the Salt March, the Satyagraha movement of Mahatma Gandhi, where we finally got freedom. And then you kind of feel that, okay, there was protest, there was this glimmer of hope which contributed to India's independence, but nothing has moved forward since then, we have got back to the old systems, the old ways still resonate. There is this heavy colonial hangover in our thought process, policies. So when you look at the Little Run of Kutch, you have entire families. These are all migrant populations where for a period of 8 months, they go to the Run of Kutch to make salt. They live in jute tents, which they construct on a frame of bamboo. There is a very harsh sort of environment and landscape where the temperatures soar like, 50 degrees plus, and then in the winters it goes to sub-zero temperatures. One, if you were to look at if you want to get a scale of how hard they work, Gujarat, it's like the largest producer of salt in the country. India is the third largest in the world, and Gujarat makes 70% of the salt production. The Little Run of Kutch, which has only 1 lakh of these agarias, they constitute for the highest quality of salt, which is 30%. It meets 30% of the demands of Indians. And you have these 1 lakh agarias who are extracting 1 million tons of salt. So, and all this is manual practice. It has come down from generations to generations. There is no scientific method. Even when they want to dig a well to fill the underground brine in the salt pans, it is just very intuitive. They know the ways. It's like how tribes all along have known which plant is poisonous, which plant has medicinal value. It's the same that they treat this land with that kind of intuition. The work is very labor intensive, and if you talk about marginalization, though this is happening every year, though it's adding so much to our economy, there is no electricity, there is no water. The amount of water that we in the city use in a day is what is provided to them in tankers for an entire week. A family of 6 people is consuming the same water for a week what we individually consume in a day. So that is what their situation is. There is no education system, because since these are migrant populations, they travel with their entire family. So there is no hope for improvement in terms of schooling, and no access to education, no access to basic amenities at all. And now when we talk about laws, like I spoke about the SALT Act, even from within India, there are new laws coming about which kind of marginalize their situation further. So the Little Run of Kutch was declared a wildlife sanctuary because the forest authorities wrongly presumed that this salt mining activity is affecting the wildlife. The wild lass, which is considered a species which is going extinct, but then later it was proved scientifically that actually their way of life is kind of promoting the wildlife and the ecology of the place. But this legal battle has been going on for a long time, and it just doesn't seem to end. Here you can see the jute tents that I was speaking about, where they've got no access to anything. You can make out it's the middle of nowhere. I was talking about the intuitive processes where they still worship nature, worship the land. Here you see a woman in the middle of the salt fields, worshipping the sun. Here you can see how difficult the terrain is with no water, no basic amenities. You could go for kilometers and kilometers. You can just notice the horizon in this picture. You don't see a thing. Again, like I told you, these are all inherited professions. So a lot of marginalized and stigmatized communities, it is not jobs that they choose. It is jobs that have been inherited, jobs that have been imposed upon them. The ecosystem of our economy is such that they just cannot get out of this vicious cycle of living. It just continues through generation and generation. She is also a 90-year-old woman who is still active. She's just taking a smoke break after a hard day of work in the salt mines. whenever the salt marshes are not in season for salt farming, this community does fishing, the Koli community. You know what the swing has been constructed with? It's an oar of a boat. So when the water goes and subsides, you see boats which were drowned initially just come up on the little run of Kaj. So the swing, what the rope is balanced on is actually the oars of a drowned boat. The next community that I have explored through this denotified narrative is the Dusad community. This community is again a denotified community which I shot in Bihar. It's very close to the Madhubani district. Now, the thing about this community is that in the earlier times, again, they also suffer the double whammy of being criminal tribe and Dalit. So in the earlier days, they were like, you know, the Manusmriti. I wanted to actually further highlight that the threat has not been only from without in terms of British colonial rule. There is a threat from within, like when you look at Brahminical practice. When we talk about decolonization, I think it's equally important to decolonize Brahminical narratives and projections on our communities. So the Manusmriti actually did not allow Dalit communities to wear precious metals, precious stones. They could not wear silver or gold. They had to wear inferior metals. In fact, before that, they were not even allowed to wear jewelry. So what this community would do in place of a necklace or a bangle, they will just make a tattoo. As you can see on her neck, it's just the tattoo. And finally, they started painting the tattoos, designs on the walls of the houses. There was a huge protest from the upper caste people saying that you cannot use our deities, our motives, you know, in your art practice. So they took inspiration from nature, and then on their walls, they created their own god, Shailesh, which is a nature god, and then they started painting in a very different technique. It's called the Godna. It's very different from Madhubani art, Mithila. They have their own art, Godna, which takes inspiration from their own god Shailesh, nature, motifs from nature, motifs from ecology, and then they started painting these things on their walls. And then there was Erika Hose, an anthropologist from Germany. She came and she suggested to them that maybe you should do this on paper to, you know, kind of earn a livelihood. And that is what they started doing. So for them, it has been like quite an interesting protest through art. We see in our culture a lot of times things were not allowed to be worn. So even if you look at Ambedkar, who always wore a suit, if he were not in the wrong place at the wrong time, for example, he always studied abroad and was educated, but had he worn that at a time he did in India, there would definitely be a lot of opposition, you know, from orthodox sort of societies. So what I have done is I have used the multiple exposure technique where I have taken their paintings which they have done on paper, paintings which they have done on wall. All this art is done exclusively by only women from the Dusad community. There are no men who do this art. It is female centric. So I have kind of merged all these layers, art done on their hats, art done on paper, the artist herself. I've taken the environment like the huts which are made from cow dung and straw. So as you can see, it's all an amalgamation of those, of the actual tattoos on their bodies. Yeah. So through the Dusad, I kind of realized that colonial systems have undermined native knowledge, philosophies, and histories to promote and make universal Western-centric, Eurocentric ideas. And these ideas were always pitched as the universal truth. They never took into account diverse perspectives of our indigenous knowledge and realities. So when we talk about decolonization, it's not only about rewriting histories. We have to kind of reclaim our intellectual pride, our intellectual knowledge, heritage, native roots, and of course, like I mentioned, the threat from within, wherein, even Brahminical narratives need to be drastically changed. The next community I've covered is the Sapera, which is also known as Kalbelia. I have covered them in Rajasthan, but they exist all over India. And so basically, the Sapera is a community of snake charmers. Uh, the snake was not just used for entertainment to collect money in terms of begging. These people actually have a lot of skill and talent. They could cure snake bites. They were quite well versed in medicinal practice. They were also into exorcism, and they kind of were looked upon by the village to cover a lot of other ailments. It wasn't just snake bites. So the thing is, when, they already existed before pre-colonial times. But when the colonists came, since these people were migratory in nature, the British wanted to contain certain populations like this, which would keep migrating from place to place. They wanted to contain them because they saw them as a threat. Also, these populations were the people who would protest colonial rule all the time. So they just wanted these kind of communities to be kept in control. And traditional forms of performances always existed in India, whether it was the monkey, whether it's the snake. You also had parrots, like astrologers using parrots to tell the future. But fortune tellers were still using animals as they had always done through centuries. The thing about the British is that because they had this ideology of supremacy, they always wanted to legitimize their supremacy through nature and other cultures. Since there was this hierarchy of animals, they always thought that the mastery of animals would be seen as a manifestation of colonial power. They wanted to control and exploit animals such as, in the food chain, which are like at the highest order, whether it's the lion or the elephant. We never trained animals like that. It is the British who took it to another level, and the whole concept of the circus and the zoo, these are all very foreign concepts to us. They never really existed in India. And this thing of subjugation of even the animal kingdom was actually tied to the colonial project itself. Because when you look at the mentality, okay, we want to subjugate someone who is higher up on the food chain to show our supremacy. So this is what they did even in India, we never had this concept of an animal being made into a doctor or a nurse, like what you would see in the circus. We have never seen animals like the tiger or a lion wearing clothes. So basically what they would do is that they would dehumanize animals and animalize human beings. So that was the major part of the colonial project. I have covered this community because there are so many acts like the SALT Act, which further put the Koli community into a problem. Then you had the Wildlife Act, which kind of made it illegal for these nomadic communities, the Jadugar communities, to kind of even hold animals such as the snake. Here itself, you can see the double standards because, you know, a certain animal like a dog is considered very safe to be your pet. You can domesticate a cow. Basically, what humanity has done is that they have created this hierarchy in the animal kingdom. You only domesticate those animals which creates a social hierarchy in which you can assume leadership. So it's fine to tame a goat, it's fine to domesticate a cow, it's good to call a dog your best friend, but then, you know, there are certain animals which are off limits. So there itself, there is an unfair sort of hierarchy. Now, what the Kalbelia have done is, those snakes might be off limit, dogs are not. So what they've started doing is that they have started training the greyhound dog for hunting and racing. It's just that they found a loophole in the system to meet their needs. And you know, normally these dogs, when they train for the races, in the race, there will be a rabbit. So the dog that runs the fastest, whoever kills the rabbit first. But now even the Wildlife Act doesn't allow that. So it's basically a fake toy rabbit, which is kept on a motorized sort of car and then sent running. Basically, what they've done is they've replaced a cold-blooded creature with a warm-blooded creature. That's the only difference that has happened. But they have still kind of continued their centuries-old profession of making a livelihood through an animal. What I found interesting about this community is when a community or a profession is stripped of tradition and identity, it just becomes mere capital. You know, it's either viewed as an asset or a liability. So when I asked them, how does your newfound investment compare with the old one? The Kalbelia were, he gave me this very insightful response. Because now he feels that the dogs are kind of serving the purpose. He said, a dog will enter a hen house, he will ruffle all the chickens, but eat just one. On the other hand, a snake will glide in, swallow plenty eggs, and glide out and go unnoticed. So even psychologically, kind of, he's convinced himself that today it's a better situation than the snake, because he's actually looking at the profession as capital. It's not like that age-old connection, the deep-rooted connection that he had with the snake. But unlike a livelihood, culture and symbolism are more difficult to toss aside. So after the greyhounds race, the famous Kalbela Nach, you know, you have that Nagin Nach, that is performed still, in spite of not having the snake. And offerings are still made to the snake gods, even after the greyhounds race. So there is a bit of sensuality, spirituality, all those aspects are still embedded into their identity. It never goes away. It's just like, you know, the snake always leaves behind its skin. Here you can see him with, this is them training. I was actually amazed because, you know, they all live in tents, polythene tents, and I just happened to come across them. And as you can see, there were these very traditional rural people who didn't even have any means of livelihood. And suddenly I saw this very posh greyhound dog and I was wondering what happened. Initially, they were hesitant to tell me because, you know, this dog racing, it's also connected to gambling. So initially, you know, there is a lot of wildlife. So he said, you know, there will be tigers. So, you know, to protect us, we've kept these dogs. And then when I entered their tents, I saw 15 of them. And I said, why do you need 15? And then slowly they came out with the truth. And then all the communities that you see over here, I've always lived with them, minimum for 25 days. And I always visited them repeatedly. So this was that story of colonization. Then I covered the Banjaras. So basically, the Banjaras were very, very evolved in pre-colonial times. They controlled all the trade routes across India. They, in fact, even controlled the economy. They controlled the transport of goods to and fro the entire country. And then what happened was when the colonists came, the monopoly of the trade routes was just kind of taken away from the Banjara. The East India Company came, they built railroads, they built roads, and then it just became an economy which was just only based on extraction and this high scale production. So the Banjaras were kind of displaced. In fact, the Banjaras were the first who actually protested against British rule, and that is why they were classified as colonial, as denotified tribes by the colonials. Also, it was interesting to note that in the age of automation, manual work is always replaced by cognitive work, and this has a direct link. Okay. Okay, so I'll just show them the. These are Banjaras in Telangana who are working in quarries. You must be wondering why they're dressed like that. So because they're nomadic, okay, so all their belongings are on them, right? They cannot leave anything in a tent. So these were shot in Telangana, the entire Banjara community. Then these are the Musahar. So basically, the communities that I covered, again in Bihar, Musahar and Nat, the Musahar rat catchers and rat eaters. So here again, I wanted to say that there was a hierarchy of food as well. So it's not like, they ate anything out of choice. Even food was an imposition. So again, they've got this double whammy of caste and denotified tribes. So they were given things which were rejected by the upper caste. So like things like millet or just the husk of a grain or only the spare parts of an animal. They never had access to, yeah. And then in the monsoon when they cannot catch rats, they kind of have this alternative profession of dressing up as women. These are straight men. They've got families, they've got children. They dress up as women and they perform in village fairs, weddings, and other events. I'll just quickly show you the pictures and wrap up. Yeah. I think I've gone overboard, so I've just moved very quickly, and that's it.
Nilesh, will you also come in case Pablo needs any translation? Um, Thank you very much, Asha. I'm so sorry that I came and stood like a timekeeper right there, but I did want to have a discussion of another 10 minutes so that people can talk to you and see the work, because we have another session opening at 2:30. I'm opening the discussion to the people. Of course, being a teacher and then a student again, I always over prepare, and I also had a whole lot of questions which I got, but I don't think I need to ask them any more questions because both their presentations were marvelous. Pablo talked about his own personal journey and Raquel's lovely thing of the echo and past and history, which was lovely. And Asha is trying to show the whole thing of the changing patterns of, not really changing, but patterns of migrations and what communities do, how they are identified, how they are, um, you know, stereotyped into different parameters. तो कुछ भी सवाल जवाब अगर आपको पूछने हैं आप प्लीज़ पूछिए. अच्छा बताइए अपने को. Just give her microphone. Just identify yourself and किससे पूछना है बता दो.
Hi, I'm Ananya. First of all, thank you so much. Like this was beyond anything I could have imagined because so my doctoral work is also on migration and in the global south. But I like being like in academia, like how we work, it's through ethnography, it's through archaeology. I have not imagined how photographs would capture this. And actually, one of my friends who works here recommended that I should come and see this. And I'm so glad I did. Because back in school, which was like 10 years ago, I could not even have imagined something like this happening here in Bihar. So kudos to the organization team as well. I think like one of the things that I was wondering, because my work is also very similar, is say like when we are writing, we know who the subject matter is. And who do we have to put our focus on? Where does the lens have to be? But like when you're actually with the lens, how do you differentiate between, and especially because a theme that came up is human versus the non-human and the hierarchy, the colonial hierarchy. So how do you do that in photographs? Like, do you have an agency of what has to be the subject or what has to be captured?
So just give a minute. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Thank you for the fact that you came. And I hope if you need to be in touch with either of them, you can take their emails since you are doing your PhD. And they both are very people who will not be silent on an email. They will respond to you. I'll request Nilesh to translate your question for Pablo, and Asha will, as I suppose, understood the question. So if you could just translate it for Nilesh.
Es una estudiante doctoral, también trabaja los temas de la sur global y eso, y estaba diciendo, es decir, primero les felicita mucho por hacer la presentación, se ha abierto sus ojos, dice, pero también dice que su forma de trabajo es más desde el texto etnográfico, el texto trabajando desde la palabra, y como ver la foto es como el método, ¿no? La herramienta de trabajar esas narrativas es algo nuevo. Entonces dice que cuando estamos escribiendo hay una parte, una materia, o el sujeto está más o menos claro en dónde estamos focados, ¿no? Pero cuando ustedes trabajan con los lentes, ¿cómo es el momento de hacer el foco? ¿Cómo dicen que eso voy a tomar? ¿Cuál es el foco o cuál es el método o forma de cómo poner el foco?
So while Pablo's digesting the question, I'll request Asha to answer.
I always mount a story before I've mounted a photograph. So when I have an idea as to what kind of narrative that I'm planning to explore, I will find communities and stories that explore that idea very effectively. So like to answer your question, though the process of taking the picture might be very impulsive and intuitive, I have already discussed in my head the aspects that I want to cover. So I will not cover all aspects. I narrow down my focus, saying, okay, this is what I want to cover. I want to cover prejudice. I want to cover displacement, whether it's displacement of job, identity, land, any of those things, I will just narrow my focus. Because, you know, once you're there, it's so easy to get carried away. Oh, what are they wearing? What are they cooking? No, I'm not interested in all those things. I will, of course, partake in all those things because I live with them. But my camera is just reserved only for those moments where I notice patterns and I take that image only when I find those patterns fracture, crack, transform. It's like very specific, my process. I don't take anything or everything. For me, it's about patterns and when patterns break. Normally, I prefer the latter. Yeah.
Para mí hay algunas palabras que lo pueden definir, que es paciencia, intuición, confianza y tiempo.
Yeah, for Pablo, some of these words may define where the lens goes. Patience, trust, time. ¿Cuál era la otra palabra? Confianza y una más dijiste. Intuition, yeah. So patience, intuition, trust, and time.
Thank you. Nikita wants to ask.
मेरा सवाल आशा के लिए है। आशा, बहुत ही खूबसूरत तस्वीरें आज आपके प्रेजेंटेशन में हम सब ने देखी यहाँ पे। बहुत अच्छा लगा, बहुत अच्छा कॉन्ट्रास्ट। मेरा आपसे ये सवाल है कि आज भारत पूरे दुनिया में चौथी लार्जेस्ट इकॉनमी है। आप आर्टिस्ट हैं, आपका एक पर्सपेक्टिव है, लेकिन क्या कहीं ऐसा है आपके इस प्रेजेंटेशन में कि आपने ब्रिटिशर्स का जो हमारे तरफ नज़रिया था, मुझे थोड़ा सा ऐसा लगा कि आपने उसको रोमांटिसाइज़ किया है, चाहे वो स्नेक चार्मर हो या कालबेलिया हो। अगर हम कॉलोनाइजेशन की बात करें तो आज के ज़माने में जब हम फेयर एंड लवली लगा के रोज़ गोरा होना चाहते हैं, हमें हिंदी बोलने में शर्म आती है भारत में होके। हम कॉरपोरेट स्लेव बनने को तैयार हैं, लेकिन अपने राज्य में जाके काम करने में हमें मुश्किलें महसूस होती हैं। क्या ये कंटेम्प्रेरी टाइम्स का जो हमारा कॉलोनाइजेशन जो इतना डीपली इनग्रेट हो गया है हम में, आपकी कला के द्वारा हो सकता है हम उसे भी कवर कर सकते हैं। और जब आप इन ट्राइब्स की बात करते हैं विच आर वेरी स्पेसिफिक टू डिफरेंट पार्ट्स ऑफ द कंट्री, आई वुड लाइक टू से दैट उनकी रिजिडिटी, उनकी लैक ऑफ फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी, क्या वो भी एक वजह है उनके पतन की?
See, as far as romanticizing goes, I have covered them as they are. It's because there is lack of awareness, okay? Many people living in the comfort of their homes in the city, the policy makers who are always making decisions in an air-conditioned room somewhere. There are many people amongst us who haven't even been to a village. So obviously when they look at images like this, it has been out of their imagination. It has been out of even things that they think about. Like when you talk about us being the fourth largest economy, you know, progress cannot be judged by the privileged alone. I think true progress, it also has to seep down to the ones who are the most stigmatized or marginalized. We have to judge progress through people who are the most vulnerable and not the other way around. Obviously, people do think of certain images as romantic, yes, because it is different from your life. I cannot be like them, neither can they be like me. You know, these are different ways of living. Migrant life, nomadic life, it is a lifestyle in itself. When you talk about sitting in a corporate job, you do have even things like digital nomads today. Where is that appropriation coming from? The entire word digital nomad. It is being appropriated from native tradition and life. So yeah, that was to answer your question. And what was the other part?
कि फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी की कमी की वजह से या क्योंकि वो इतने फिक्स्ड हैं पेड़ की तरह रिजिडिटी, क्या इसकी वजह से भी उनका पतन हुआ है? जो हमारे ये नोमैड्स हैं या हमारे जो आप जिप्सीज कह लें या ट्राइबल्स हैं, कहीं क्या ये गलती उनकी भी है कि उन्होंने समय के साथ नहीं बदलने की कोशिश की, अडेप्ट नहीं किया?
No, in fact, contrary to your point, they are the most flexible. You're talking about a person who is so rooted to this way of life. Ironically, I use the word rooted, though they are nomadic. You look at someone who can pitch a tent today in one place, be in another place tomorrow. There cannot be any more adaptability and flexibility other than that. You're looking at someone who has no basic amenities, be it food, water, electricity, all the things that we think of as basic necessities. To them, it's a luxury. So if they are able to live their life without all these things, I don't see it as a lack of flexibility. I think it's a lack of flexibility on our part, wherein we don't want them to assimilate them into our society the way they deserve to be. You know, even assimilation, it has to be done on the other person's terms. You cannot look at assimilation by erasing someone else's native reality, native knowledge, or, you know, that's not what assimilation is about. Even migration should be happening the other way around as well. When they want to migrate to our societies, are we open enough to it? Not at all. So I think the rigidity is more in our perceptions of them, our perceptions of their history, the stigma and the taboos that we hold against them. It's our rigidity. I don't think they have a problem in coming towards us. No. I have been doing this work for 30 years. I have covered hundreds of communities. This is a false misperception. A lot of people ask me, why are you going there? Isn't it dangerous? What are you doing with these people? Touch wood, I haven't had a single bad experience. I have always been welcome. I am the stranger to them. You know, I'm going alone and they are very welcoming of strangers. I have never had a problem. It depends on how you approach people, right? You can't just go barge in with your camera and start taking pictures. There is a way of cultivating trust, interest, curiosity. It's all those things which we as professionals do and know how to do in our practice.
सवाल एक पाब्लो साहब से है और दूसरा तदानी जी से है। पाब्लो जी से जो सवाल है वो अर्जेंटीना के रहने वाले हैं और इन्होंने डिकोलाइजेशन की बात की है, जिसमें कि पर्यटन और आर्थिक एक्सप्लॉयटेशन जो है वो उसको भी शामिल किया है। और जो मुझे जानकारी है, अर्जेंटीना साउथ अमेरिका का देश है और वहाँ स्पेनिश कॉलोनी थी और स्पेनिश लोग वहाँ पे अभी भी हैं और जो पहले इंडियन लोग थे उन लोग को ज़्यादातर लोगों को तो ख़त्म ही कर दिया गया। तो आप किस डिकोलाइजेशन की बात कर रहे हैं? क्या वो आज़टेक, माया, इनको आप लोग तस्वीर में लाना चाहते हैं या स्पेनिश लोग को लाना चाहते हैं या आप जो कैपिटलिस्ट हैं उनको लाना चाहते हैं या पर्यटकों को लाना चाहते हैं? वो सब क्या आपके दुश्मन हैं या वो लोग सब कॉलोनिस्ट हैं? एक तो ये सवाल है। दूसरा सवाल थदानी से है, इनका जो थीम है कि ये डिकोलाइजेशन का, मेरे ख्याल से वो मिसनोमर है, क्योंकि वो इन्होंने जो दर्शाया है वो सभी जातियां जो भारतवर्ष में हैं, बिहार में हैं, भारतवर्ष में हैं, जो उनकी पारंपरिक उनका जो पेशा है, रहन सहन है, जो उनका पहनावा है, उसको दिखलाता है। और ये जो उन्होंने बीच बीच में ब्राह्मणिकल सिस्टम की बात की है, तो ये उनका थीम डिकोलाइजेशन के ऊपर मेरे ख्याल से गलत है और भारतीय एंथ्रोपोलॉजिकल जो थीम है उसके दृष्टिकोण से उनका सही होता है। तो क्या वे इस संबंध में कुछ टिप्पणी करना चाहेंगी? ये दो सवाल कृपया।
When we talk about denotified tribes, what is denotified tribes? The tribes which were considered criminal, it is a result of the Criminal Tribes Act, which is a colonial era act. of 1871. When we talk about decolonizing these people, it is about changing their circumstances and situation, which hasn't changed at all. The perceptions continue. The whole world, the whole word denotified tribe, it is a colonial era construct. It is not we as Indians who have come up with this classification. It is completely a colonial construct.
Te cuento la pregunta, es un poco inconsciente para mí la pregunta, pero te digo. Dicen, por ejemplo, que has hablado de la decolonización, nos has platicado de cómo está pasando ese proceso de la neocolonización con productos, no, con la explotación industrial, con la explotación como de por parte de las empresas grandes, también el turismo, ¿no? Entonces cuenta de cómo, por ejemplo, dice en Argentina la mayoría de la gente habla el español, que es también porque los españoles colonizaron a toda esa zona. La mayoría de los indígenas originarias ya no están ahí, al menos en Argentina hay pocos, eso es lo que dicen. También, entonces, ¿de qué decolonización estás hablando? ¿Qué quieres hacer? ¿Traer los aztecas, mayas? Por eso digo que es una pregunta un poco de como que, porque no son de allá, ¿no? Pero mayas, aztecas, esas personas indígenas, de vuelta, ¿de qué tipo, que parar el turismo o qué hacer para el progreso económico? ¿Cómo estás pensando, cómo estás contándonos los procesos de decolonización?
Bueno, primero no creo tener esa respuesta. Y segundo, lo que yo creo es por lo menos transmitir la conciencia de saber que estamos, de saber quiénes somos y de saber de dónde venimos.
Yeah, so first of all, it was not a reaction that he was expecting, but since it is, so he says that what I'm trying to transmit here is to go back to our roots a little bit and see, and not saying that we are indigenous or not indigenous, simply who we are, from where are we coming, what do we belong to.
Creo que si somos conscientes, por lo menos en Argentina, de que somos una nación hace más de 200 años. Los españoles se fueron hace más de 200 años. Lo que pasó para atrás, siento que no se puede traer al presente, sí se puede entender y respetar. Si no entendemos y respetamos el pasado, nos va a volver a pasar lo mismo.
Yeah, so Argentina, for example, Argentina 200 साल से एक फ्री कंट्री है, स्पेनिश इंडिपेंडेंट कंट्री है। 1816 से अर्जेंटीना इज़ इंडिपेंडेंट। 1816 से स्पेनिश राज नहीं चलता है। और ये ज़रूरी है कि हम अपने पास्ट को समझें, अपने भूत को समझें, हमारे इतिहास को समझें और उसको क्रिटिकली देखें ताकि हम अपने प्रेजेंट को समझ सकें। हम अपने प्रेजेंट को समझ ही नहीं सकते अगर हम अपने इतिहास को ना समझें और उसको क्रिटिकली देखने की कोशिश करें।
Lo mismo en mi caso personal, mi familia es judía y migró durante muchos años hasta llegar a Argentina y yo no tengo ninguna posibilidad de reencontrarme con ese pasado porque está perdido. Siento que reconocer el pasado para entender el presente es una forma de resistir a una colonización o a una nueva o una neocolonización, pero es una sensación, no es una respuesta o un hecho concreto.
Gracias. Yeah, so for example, इनकी अपनी फैमिली ये बिलोंग करते हैं एक जू फैमिली, एक यहूदी परिवार से, जो कि वर्ल्ड वॉर के समय अर्जेंटीना माइग्रेट हुए, जैसे हमने पहले भी देखा, और उनका कोई, जैसे हमने कहा, उनका कोई निशान, कोई रिकॉर्ड नहीं है, तो ये अपने पास से एक तरह से टूट चुके हैं। हालांकि बहुत सारे तरीके हैं अपने आप को जानने के। सो जो इनका मेन मकसद है, जो सबसे प्रिंसिपल ऑब्जेक्टिव है, वो यही है कि हम अपने आप को दोबारा से कैसे देखें, हम अपने आप की जड़ों तक कैसे जाएं और हमको अपने आप को समझें। और ये ग्लोबल साउथ के लिए, सारे हमारी कंट्रीज़ के लिए, लोगों के लिए शायद एक तरीका हो सकता है। लेकिन ये एक फीलिंग है, ये एक अप्रोच है, ये एक ज़रूरी आंसर नहीं है कि ऐसे ही होगा। ये कोई रिस्पॉन्स परफेक्ट टेक्निक नहीं है कि ऐसे ही करना है। सिंपली इट्स अ फीलिंग, इट्स अ वे ऑफ बीइंग।
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank both the speakers today. For the young lady who's doing a PhD in the Global South, I'm really happy that you have gained. And we as organizers always feel that even if we can touch one heart and we can build one connection, one bridge, lots of cross-cultural ties are built. So you can change your email numbers, and I'm sure both Asha and Pablo will be happy to talk to you, help you in your research, and I'm sure it'll be a rocking PhD. So thank you very much, and for all those who are a bit shy of asking questions, can meet them over lunch. And our next session is at the newly reopened Patna Museum with a very appropriate topic, the Patna Kalam. So I hope to see you there at 2:30. Thank you very much.